Today we have Sue Markush. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, how did that happen?
Great.
And we're working on our sequences through biology. What we've done so far, and the main thread of this class, is to tell the story of how we humans came to be. That's kind of where we want to get to today. But first, high school. What were you doing in high school?
What was I doing in high school?
Yeah.
I was, actually I wasn't in high school a whole lot because I was a rider, a horseback rider. So, but I loved science, and we lived on a farm, and so had a lot of, like you guys, we're kind of rural, right, out here in Western Mass. So you get exposure to a lot of what's going on, whether you want to or not, and it just depends on how much you look at. Like, why does that happen, or what's that there, for? Does that, why do I need this? So I had those questions as a high schooler, and so I just kind of, when I went back into school in college, started gearing myself towards science.
Just science in general. You didn't have a specialty
yeah.
yet.
No, but I also loved English as well. So it's like any high schooler, right?
That's funny. You're the third person that have gone through the English phase to get into the sciences.
I actually got a scholarship to go to college in my short story fiction. That was not science at all. So, yeah, it's been an interesting route.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All these journeys that the people before you have been equally, not random, but a progression through a lot of different fields before they finally settled on something. So now you're in a bachelor's program.
So yeah, and it just is critical thinking and keeping your mind open, right? And so it's great to try everything because everything's interwoven: art and math and English and science. And so I started out actually taking courses in a community college when I was in high school. So my senior year, I basically didn't go to high school. I was mostly just finishing up in community college. And then took a break to have kids, so I don't have a conventional route, and then went back to school, and I ended up with a bachelor in science as a physician assistant. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's kind of like a mid-level thing. You're sort of like a doctor. You can write prescriptions, and I worked in the ER, and then I went back to school and got my master's in education because I taught a lot. I was precepting nursing students and other PA students, and so here I am. And so I'm back where I started at the community college level. But my specialty is anatomy and physiology of the human body, and I have a really big interest in this new research in microbiome. And this is going to tie in really well with what you guys have been studying, right? So at the beginning of Earth, you have all these atoms, they come together, they form molecules, and then biological molecules, and then they form cell parts, and then they form the cell, right? We are made up of trillions of those cells, and some of them haven't changed since the beginning of time. Theorized, right? Because we'll never know for sure, but it's pretty strong evolutionary history, as you probably found out through the other biology instructors. What's on the horizon now is that we know we have germs on us, right? We know we have like staph and strep in us. We have E. coli in our stomachs. These are bacteria. We also have fungi. We have protozoa or parasites, and we have viruses that live on us. For every one of our cells, there are 10 of those, right? Now, viruses aren't cells, but either the other things. So we're really more other stuff than our own self, which is pretty crazy. So 1 to 10. So we're full of these microbes that have created through these millions of years this symbiotic relationship with us, right? And they have a lot to do, and this is the new research, if you guys are interested in this at all, it's really cool. They have a lot to do with our health and our immune system and how we digest food and how long we live, and if we have an autoimmune disease or an allergy. It has to do with our relationship with the bacteria that lives on our skin, in our nasal passages, in our stomach. Most of them are in our gut. So yeah, it's really interesting because it is theorized, because of the way our bodies are made, that we evolved from herbivores, right? We have that long intestinal system. We have the appendix, which was where bacteria lived to chomp down carbohydrates like food stuff, plant material, because we can't really digest a lot of that. We also, with herbivores, if you notice, their mouths are much smaller in relative size to their heads. If you think of like a carnivore, like a dog, they have huge mouths, right? They also don't have enzymes to digest plant material in their mouth, and we do. So that's the theory. We've kind of evolved to eat meat and vegetables. Is there any vegetarians in here? No? All omnivores? Any just carnivores? I had one student in one of my A&P classes go, that's all I eat. I don't eat any vegetables. No, I don't believe that. But so, should I just go on about the microbiome? Because this is really cool because it ties into how we've evolved out of a species. So I don't know if you guys have seen films where the very first cell in life, the very first organism in life was like one cell, right? And it could create its own food, and then it could capture sun. Plants are way more evolved than we are because not only can they grab the sun's energy and then create glucose, they can use their own glucose. So we have to eat that glucose, so we're really eating the sun. But our cells are all kind of very similar. That's why they can take bacteria, inject it with certain DNA for medications and immunizations, and then because the bacteria replicates so quickly, we can then have an amplification of that DNA that we want, and then we put it into medications and then we take it. So we've always had this relationship, right? So what's shifting for us is that we used to believe that, the only good bug is a dead bug or germ. What is a germ? The bacteria on our bodies are not germs. They're symbiotic creatures or organisms that live with us and help us, right? So what's happening through antibiotic use and the change in the type of food we use is those things shift, right? And then we can't recognize ourselves anymore. So keep that in mind, because I'll go back to, it's theorized now, and they're about to prove this, that in the womb, the baby is basically sterile. They haven't been inoculated, if you will, with the germs that are around us. So if they have, a normal birth, not like a C-section or anything, if they have a normal birth, they get inoculated with germs or bacteria, fungi, whatever mom has, as they give birth, and then if they nurse and have her milk, then they get inoculated with more germs. This creates their microbiome. This is that other part of you, the greater part of you, the 9/10 of you, where you're only 1/10 of it. And so for the first 3 years of your life, the bacteria or the microbiome, I'm saying bacteria, but it's all sorts of stuff, shifts and changes. Like some will grow more, that's why little babies can get little fungal infections and they're fine, and then those go down, or they get more bacteria in their nose and those go down, and then they're big bacteria in their gut and those go down. And it all like shifts and adjusts everything, and our body reacts to them by either creating more enzymes or less. So it's this complicated dance that we do with the bacteria that's on us and in us. By age 3, that's your genetic microbiome. And it's very closely related to your family members, okay? So this whole thing of wash your hands, be super sterile, clean your house, don't touch dirty things is actually not good for us to the degree that some people take it. Taking too many antibiotics, not good for us. Or not taking them in enough lethal dose to kill bad bacteria. Because as you know, antibiotics kill good bacteria as well. So people can get fungal infections like thrush, or yeast infections or diarrhea if they take antibiotics that kill their good bacteria. So then your body, your whole microbiome has to shift. So the other big thing, so this is huge research, because what they're doing now is taking microbiome. Let's say somebody is suffering from a disease because their microbiome in their gut has shifted, like C. difficile. Has anybody heard of that? Right? It's a common bacteria that overgrows when people take antibiotics, and it causes horrible diarrhea and dehydration, and it's very hard to get rid of. So people with C. diff, what they're doing now is they're taking like mom or siblings' microbiome and they're putting it into these people with C. diff, and it goes away. So that's a cool frontier of medicine. There are also diet has a lot to do with it. So there's this huge thing about the GMO. You guys are all familiar with the genetically modified, organisms. So GMO food is being altered so much that our body doesn't recognize it as something that we can digest. And our body meaning our microbiome more than anything else. Because we recognize ourself as self and then other bacteria is non-self, right? And when you get something of non-self in your body, you have an allergic reaction. That's all that is. Is this making sense? Yeah, so that's the other thing. So there's this kind of rise in autoimmune diseases and allergies. It might be related to the way that we're messing with our food, and shifting those proteins that are all made of, cells that we used to recognize. It also might come from messing with our microbiome. So another field is relating it to cancer. I heard this great piece from this Harvard professor. He said he's always loved onions. His family has always loved onions. And his microbiome has shifted in such a way, like he eats an onion a day, and shifted in such a way that he has a low genetic predisposition to some cancers. And it's crazy stuff. So he said, well, wait a minute, is there something to this? So he took people that ate a lot of onions, a huge group of them, and studied them, and they have the same genetic or microbiome genetic makeup. So that's just like one way that we're learning that actually we need to feed our microbiome. We need to have all this stuff on us and in us all the time. So that's a really, that's going to just take off if you're interested in getting into biotechnology or any of those science endeavors. It's very, very cool stuff.
Enzyme, you used the word. A lot of people don't know what that word means.
Okay.
And let's talk about symbiosis too, and define that.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure how much you knew or don't know.
Well, we've chatted around these things a little bit,
Right.
but let's hear it from a biologist.
Okay.
When you use that word.
So a symbiotic relationship is one where two organisms live together, basically, and they both benefit from the relationship. Okay, so like for instance, we have E. coli in our gut. We supply E. coli with nutrients, a nice warm environment where it can flourish and divide, and what E. coli does is help us break down some foods. Okay, we also have other bacteria in our guts that create vitamin K, which we have to have to stop bleeding disorders or stop bleeding to death, basically, or vitamin B12 or some of the vitamin Bs for our nervous system. That can only be created with the bacteria in our skin. In our gut. There's staph, which we always think, oh, a staph infection, that's awful, and strep. But if you wipe that out, fungus will take over, or other skin diseases will take over. So we actually want that on there. It's just not the bad staph. It's not the bad strep. So that's a symbiotic relationship. We give the bacteria a place to live, and they give us something in return. Versus other kinds of like a, kind of a parasite relationship, or one that is not symbiotic, where when we get infections, we're suffering, whereas I'm just saying bacteria or virus flourishes. That's not the kind of relationship I'm talking about.
So again, we're talking about a dynamic balance here.
That's right.
Where each helps the other.
Yep, and it shifts. Yeah. It shifts with environmental factors. What's going on outside? What's the temperature? What are we eating? What's how much pollution or toxins are we exposing ourselves to every day? It'll shift our microbiome, and therefore our body's ability to fight off disease shifts. Our body's ability to fight off aging shifts. So just very important, you think about what goes in your mouth. It's all coming down to like food and rest and taking care of the critters that live on you, because they're 9/10 of you. You're only 1/10 the human cell, which is crazy, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and then enzymes. So, you've studied, right, how atoms come together, create these compounds. There are these compounds that pretty much from the beginning of time are very, very important catalysts for the chemical reactions that go on in each one of our cells. They're called enzymes. They're a protein. Proteins basically are what your DNA codes for. There's tons of them, like their hair color, all that stuff comes down to proteins. But enzymes help reactions in our body happen. As a matter of fact, if we don't have enzymes, reactions won't happen. A really good example of that would be lactase. Anything with ACE on the end is usually like a human enzyme. If we don't have lactase in our system, we can't digest what? Lactose. And therefore we are what?
Lactose intolerant.
Yep. So we have, enzymes shift too, back and forth. So that's just one of like 60,000 types of enzymes that we have to have for basic chemical reactions in each cell.
So they're reaction helpers.
They are, yep. And without them, it wouldn't happen. Or if it did, it wouldn't be fast enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I love this whole microbiome thing, and they're finding now that kids that you sit in the dirt, put dirty stuff in their mouth, actually have this
suck on rocks,
have this incredible immune system. Obviously they can get into bad stuff and get sick, but for the most part, kids have this phenomenal immune system because it just is like, picture like new body, right? Up to 3 years old, boom, all this stuff grows on them. You can almost see it. I can now that I know so much. And so they are very tolerant. And actually, if they get little colds in and out, that's okay, because it's shifting the microbes in a way that's healthy for them. So we're, pediatricians and all are starting to come around like, whoa, like let kids be sick, let it run its course, let kids put rocks in their mouth, not swallow them, but let them touch things and play out in the dirt. And as parents, we just want to do scrub and clean off everything and don't touch my baby. I love seeing like 8-day-old babies out in the public, like at a fair. And parents are like, I wouldn't bring my baby out. And it's like, that baby is going to be so healthy, because mom is just doing and dad is doing what really should be done. Get them out into, within reason. Obviously, you don't want to have a sick parent coughing on them or something like that. But yeah, so it all has to do with our relationship with the germs that are on our body. You guys have any questions at all? Are you curious about? Yes.
You mentioned the appendix.
Yeah.
And, I remember, I think, for a long time they were saying that the role of the appendix, you can go without it. And now there's like new research saying that they found what the role that it does. So
Good
living
question.
without an appendix, what are the consequence without living without an appendix?
Pros
Okay.
and cons of appendix removal.
Okay, so this is my theory, because I've looked into this quite a bit. So the appendix is thought to be a vestigial structure. Vestigial means it used to be useful, but it's not anymore through evolution. It's kind of evolved out. We have some vestigial structures on us, like our little toe, our wisdom tooth. Can anyone move their ears? All right, so I don't know if you guys can see this, but I can do this. I can move my ears back and forth. There's a muscle here that animals have when they move their ears, like dogs or horses, right? And that's a vestigial structure. Some of us have it, some of us don't. I don't need that anymore, obviously, because my ears, I can turn my head. Same with the little bump on the top of your ear here. It's called Darwin's tubercle. Picture a dog's ear flapped over. That's what that is, and through time, it's just withdrawn. The appendix, our coccyx, our little tailbone. We don't need tails anymore. So there's just this little bone that's left. Those are vestigial structures. So the appendix is thought to have been one, but it didn't completely disappear. And what it did was housed bacteria that could break down cellulose, because we don't have enzymes in our body to help break down cellulose. It's called fiber. We need that because it cleans our system out. But what has happened over time is, because it's been there, it's become useful again. And now it's housing immune system, or kind of lymph tissue, and certain hormones that help our immunity. So that's the latest research that they have found. There's some cell pockets or tissue in the appendix that actually house like white blood cells or lymphocytes or certain immune responders. So they're keeping it in. So what is the result of taking out nothing? Because you've got you've got tonsils, you've got all these other spleen, all these other organs that will help you with your immune system. But the fact that the appendix is now taking on another role is really, really interesting. I mean, we won't see it in many generations, but who knows, Maybe it'll allow us to live underwater at some point. Who knows, Who knows? So that's a great question. That's a great question. And when you get into anatomy and physiology, you should challenge your teacher. Yeah. do some reading about that. Not be a pain, but challenge, critical thinking. Yes?
When was all this research done?
I'd say over the last 20, I mean, some of this, believe it or not, was known like in the 50s and 60s, right? But, you know, we didn't have the technology. So it's with this technology boom, the ability to go in and actually see this stuff. And what's so crazy is these guys like Darwin and you know, scientists since him have imagined what it looked like, and they're pretty much spot on, because now we see it with our electron microscopy. So in the last 20 years, a lot of this stuff has just taken off. In the last 10 years, the whole microbiome thing. In the last 5 years, we're actually creating stuff to use from our microbiome. So it's pretty crazy stuff. Yeah. Any other questions?
So, yeah, I got a bunch.
Okay.
Is this being applied medically, that you'll create a specific creature
Yes.
that would correct some immune deficiency, for instance?
Yes. Big one, have you guys heard of celiac disease? Right, that's a lot of people have celiac or even gluten intolerance or wheat intolerance, right?
Yeah.
So what they're trying to do now is introduce good microbiomes from a relative back into your gut. And this is kind of gross first thing in the morning, but what they do basically is they're called fecal transplants. Fecal is poop, right? So they take it from a relative, put it in a blender, and then basically get it back into your system. Say I had celiac disease or an autoimmune disorder or some sort of gut disorder, and they're actually finding the microbiome is planting itself and taking over and correcting autoimmune, or helping to correct some autoimmune things. So that's just one example of many. They're also creating immunizations that are not synthetic so much, but they're actually from original microbiomes. So it's just basically re-inoculating ourselves with what we should have had, but because of environmental factors and toxins and bad food and whatever, we've annihilated. So they're reintroducing those. So yeah, that's a forefront. That, if you guys want job stability and you love that kind of stuff, go. It's predicted as one of the top 10 jobs for the next 20 years. Matter of fact, 8 out of the 10 top job predictions for the next 20 years is in medicine or in biology of some kind. So it's pretty cool stuff, I think. I think it's really cool.
And are they like taking this stuff from somewhere, or are they actually creating it?
They're taking it from relatives. That's kind of the latest research. But they're also taking it from people and then putting it in a dish and amplifying it. Because bacteria, I'm just picking on bacteria, but because these microorganisms can divide so rapidly and then shift their DNA or genetic component, they mutate so rapidly, they're really fooling with that. They've who knows what they've already created. I think way more than we'll know about right now, right?
So what other kinds of autoimmune diseases besides celiac is this technique being used for?
Well, let's see here, because I have a list here. Let me see, there's some things in here I didn't want to forget. There's asthma.
Asthma.
Yeah.
Now that's a reaction of the bronchial tubes.
It is,
primarily.
but it is kind of an autoimmune, not autoimmune so much, but an overreaction. So in other words, we're exposed to an allergen or something in the air that normally we would just cough out, or just our body's mechanisms would surround and destroy. But if our microbiome is off, right, we see it and we don't have the capability of just going, oh, it's just, you know, it's just hairy. We can deal with hairy. Our body goes, oh my God, major invader. And then it starts this cycle that doesn't turn off. And so everything inflames and closes down and you can't breathe. So it's an overreaction of our body. So it's kind of a type of autoimmune, because autoimmune actually is the same thing. Psoriasis, they're doing work on psoriasis. That's the skin attacking itself, basically. It just recognizes itself as a foreign invader, or it doesn't recognize it as self. Some of that may have to do with the relationship with the microbiome. They're not sure yet. So a lot of that stuff is not out. But the big deal with autoimmune, like any kind of inflammatory reaction, lupus,
MS?
MS, huge research being done on MS, yep, which is multiple sclerosis. And that's basically the body just tears down the myelin sheath on your nervous system. And without that myelin sheath, the electrical impulses can't go through. If you pick these wires, have black on them, right? Underneath is the wire. The black it serves as a conductor, so it can just go very quickly. In MS, there are holes in that. And so people, get, kind of these nervous system inabilities, basically, and it can progress, it can halt. So that kind of stuff. I think just about anything that you can think of. A lot of the digestive issues, they're really honing in on because the majority of the microbes in our body are in our gut. So, any kind of celiac, Crohn's disease, you familiar with these, or you've heard them, right? It's basically the body putting holes in itself because it's just mixed up in there. Part of this is genetic, right? Because it gets passed on, and we pass on our microbes, going back to giving birth. We pass on our microbes, which are our kind of genetic makeup. So you can now go and do your microbe genome. You guys have heard of the Human Genome Project? What they'll do is they'll go in, they'll look at all your genes, basically. And now what they're starting to do is do your microbe genome, because it's crucially important, right? It's the majority of us. So everybody who eats onions, for instance, and passes that gene on may not get a certain kind of cancer. I mean, that's a crazy thought, but that's where it's going. They're exploring that. Let's see, what else here?
How about diabetes?
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, that's huge, because that incorporates all the major modern issues that we have, right? We have, as humans, as modern issues, especially in our developed United States of America, have put ourselves with less exercise, more refined and synthetic foods. The foods are basically poisoned. I mean, really they are. You look at the additives, the plastics, the preservatives that are put in our foods. And thank God we have this liver. I was in my class, I'm like, pat your liver every day, because that baby takes care of all these things that you don't realize it takes care of and detoxifies. But it needs help from its microbes. So diabetes is an autoimmune disease, diabetes 1, because the pancreas is basically attacking its own beta cells. And the beta cells is what creates insulin. Insulin is what helps you grab that sugar and pull it into your cells. And so without that, you can't access sugar. And of course, that's going to disrupt everything. So they're looking into microbes that will help counter that autoimmune attack. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is obesity also related to the biomes in the digestive?
It absolutely changes. Yeah, so your predisposition to diabetes has a lot to do with your microbiome, and that has actually been established. So certain microbiomes lead you towards a propensity for diabetes 2. So this is a difference. Diabetes 1 usually happens earlier. It's a higher genetic component, meaning you could have inherited the ability of your pancreas to attack itself, and you don't create insulin.
So that's childhood diabetes.
Yeah, for the most part, right. Although there's now childhood diabetes 2.
Oh, dear.
Diabetes 2 is your pancreas is fine, but because you've consumed so much refined sugar, the pancreas has been spitting out insulin, and the cells become insensitive to the insulin, because that's what your cells do. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So they shut down. All of a sudden, you can't get those sugars in. So it's basically a desensitization of your cells to access that sugar. It's not your pancreas, which is diabetes 1. Does that make sense? So diabetes 2 is just you've abused your system, basically. So usually, people with diabetes 2 tend to be obese. People tend to be overweight or obese because lack of exercise, sitting in front of our computers, sedentary lifestyles, refined sugars, terrible diets, mass-produced food, too much food. I mean, and it's nobody's fault, right? It's just, it's just the way our society has evolved. And when you eat sugar, you release dopamine and you feel good. And food companies have figured that out. And when you eat, now let's go back to the atoms, when you eat things that are stuffed with hydrogens, believe it or not, those are excitotoxins. So like trans fats and hydrogenated foods, we love the taste of those, like, you know, oily potato chips and, you know, candy, and right, it tastes good, makes us feel good. It's not good for our body. Shifts the microbiome, shifts our ability to deal with this stuff, abuses the pancreas, abuses the liver, and we get sick. That's the way it is. So
I heard that they tried to ban trans fat a while ago. I don't know if they're still doing that or if they're phasing into it.
yeah, so trans fats are, right, these lipid strings loaded with hydrogens, right, and like artificially stuffed on hydrogens. And I wish I had a board because I start drawing. Or maybe you'd like, thank God she doesn't have a board. But what happens is they're bad for our bodies. Basically, if hydrogens break off, they have a positive charge usually, and those are oxidizing, right? So that's why we take antioxidants to swoop those up. That's why we breathe. Oxygen grabs hydrogens and turns it into H2O, which is fine, right? And we pee it out or we use it for something else. That's just one example. So they ban trans fats because they're horrible for they damage our vessels, they increase heart disease, they increase diabetes. But this is this is where I get so angry with these food companies and like who's in bed with who here, because you're supposed to have 0 trans fats and everything, but you don't have to report anything under 0.5. So each serving could have 0.49 trans fats in it, and on the label it says 0 trans fats. So if you ate 3 servings, if you eat more than 2 of trans fats, it's very, very dangerous for you. So you could easily eat that if you ate a whole thing of whatever, ice cream. Oreos, which, yeah, on a bad day I might have eaten half a thing, you know. So, I mean, I eat junk food too, but I'm just so aware of what goes in my mouth and what goes in my kids' mouths. So, yeah, that's a good question. So beware. If it looks like it has a bunch of other junk in it, and it's high in fat, and
It's probably not trans fat free.
It's probably not trans fat free. Yeah, good question. You guys are clever. This is good.
So here's a question for you.
Okay.
We've been studying the sustainability of this planet with respect to the number of human beings it can carry on a continuous level. And we found that number comes out 2 billion if you have a planet full of meat eaters, and 10 to 12 billion if you have pure vegetarians. Now, our past biology people that have been here have been okay with meat as long as it was grass-fed and not feedlot kind of thing, and that kind of thing. Where do you come down on this?
I eat meat. I'm very similar to that, but I eat very little meat, maybe once every 2 weeks. And it's hard to give up meat, right? Like a hamburger, man, a good hamburger, we're all, bacon, right? But the thing is, as you know, the cow consumes so much corn. Did you guys just hear about the cows they slaughtered in California that were cancer-ridden, and they slaughtered them anyway? So it's that kind of stuff that is just
And
like...
put them into the food chain?
And yeah. So the FDA just closed that down. And it's a major meat supplier for our country. Anyway, look it up. So it's like that kind of stuff that scares me. And of course, they're getting GMO corn, so that alters the cow. The cow's gut gets sick, so then they give them antibiotics because cows aren't meant to eat corn, really. There's grass feeders. So it's just, we don't have the room for that. So that's going to come down. For me, it's more of an issue of how they're raised. But I think if everybody had backyard chickens and like 4 or 5 families shared a cow, that you raised on your lot or on your an acre or 2 of land, I think it's very, very doable. It is, but yeah, we definitely are going to have to cut down on our meat consumption, especially beef, because they consume acres and acres of food and acres of corn. So.
I asked the other people when they said the same kind of thing you did, but how do you feel about hunting?
Oh, I agree with hunting. As long as you're just not out there, woo, right, with your Bud Light, and leave the animals. I think because of the way that we've creeped in on their land, we've upset the relationship. It's just like our microbiome. Now there's more deer, or there's more this. And if there's more of something that can be sustained by the environment, they'll get disease and they'll die. And I think since we've wiped out, say, I'll pick a deer, we've wiped out or moved out a lot of the predators, natural predators of deer, we have to take over as a predator. And really, I think that kind of meat is excellent for you, right? They've been out in nature, and so I'm fine with hunting. It's unfortunately a hunting mentality I'm not fine with. But you know, I've met plenty of people that hunt to actually fill their freezer. They don't go and buy a cow from California. They don't have to. So you know, and there's pheasant, and they hunt their turkeys for Thanksgiving. You know, I think it's you know, necessity. And I know, you know, I love animals, but it's not healthy for, we have to take over some of the roles that we've managed to mess up, right? Either that, or we need to bring back what we messed up. And I don't think we're about to do that. There's too many of us, right? We've taken nice wetland, we've taken, you know, areas and put a house farm, you know, meaning tons of, I go by them because you could tell it was a beautiful old farm with big fields, and now there's houses everywhere, right? And I'm like, oh, there's a nice house farm, you know, because that's what they're growing there. So that's how I feel about it. But it has to be done. Like, people just hunting for game and then leaving it there is wasteful. But that happens all over the world, right? It just breaks my heart.
So what's the effect of meat on the biome? Is it a necessity? Can you get by with a vegan diet
Absolutely.
and still be okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of proteins, and you know, the things you worry about if you don't eat meat are certain proteins, your omega oils, which are your essential fatty acids, and you have to have that for brain and memory and mood. You can get that from flax. Soy is huge, although we're messing with soy, we're messing that up too. So you have to get really well-grown organic soy. Yeah, there's beans, there's all sorts of stuff that you can get everything you need from. Like, an avocado is one of the most complete foods in the world. So if you had to pick something on a stranded island, one thing you could eat, avocado is it. It's got the fats, the proteins, the carbs, lots of your vitamins, and the photo nutrients that they can get from the sun. So it's kind of a complete package. But yeah, I know you can. Yeah, it's just that people who take on veganism, sometimes they don't realize that they're not replacing their meat with other things.
And nuts.
Yeah, right. Legumes, nuts.
Yeah,
Yep.
beans.
Nuts are huge. Absolutely. They have all that in there. That's why I said plants are so much more evolved than we are. They really are. They do it all.
What makes you say that? Explain that.
Just because I don't know. They just they grow, they last. For the most part, if it wasn't for our interaction, they'd be disease-free. Let's pick trees, right? They can create their own food from the sun, right? How crazy is that? Who's done photosynthesis in here? Yeah, you've studied photosynthesis. It's really fun process. And then they have everything that we have in our cells. We don't have everything a plant has, but a plant has everything we have, plus some. So we don't have chlorophyll or chloroplasts.
But they can't move and they can't think.
Who knows, right? Who knows?
There's like a banana tree or something that can move. It just walks around.
Really?
What?
Puts its roots down wherever it finds a
Not
good
like as fast as we do, but it just sort of falls.
That, you know what, yeah, because it grows, right? Like the blob, right? And you take sunflowers. Has anybody seen a field of sunflowers? In the morning, the flowers are
tracking the sun.
tracking the sun,
Yeah.
and in the evening, all the flowers are faced west. That's heliotropism, and that has to do with enzymes. Enzymes cause these reactions to twist their stalk so that they track the sun. It's really so they can move.
You made a comment about soy that kind of relates to something that our previous guest talked about. There are some there are some disruptors in soy with respect to humans. Is that true for organic as well as inorganic? I mean, you made a dividing line between regular soy and the soy that we grow now, GMO stuff.
Right.
Is regular soy that good for you?
Not in excess. So you bring up a good point. When going back to the, say, organic non-GMO versus that, that's only because you don't want a soy that's genetically modified or been pesticide, or because that just makes what little it does have bad for you 10 times worse, right? And then our body recognizes it as something that it needs to attack. And so that sets off this whole business. But soy does have some things that our liver has to deal with. Celery has that. You know, but soy, people get on the soy kick, and that's how this whole thing came about. We consume too much. We don't, our country, we eat as humans, you know, because we have stuff. We're well. We really are. Compared to a lot of countries, we have an abundance of stuff. We eat too much. We eat more protein than we need, way more protein than we need. It's just the quality has to be good. So if we ate in small amounts, you would get what you need, because a lot of the vitamins and things can get recycled. You know, you guys will learn this, when your whole ATP production, your energy production, that's our chemical energy, it has things that are recycled. We're great recycling machines in our cells, but we're messing that up because we wipe it out with toxins and, you know, stuff.
Endocrine, that's the word. Endocrine disruptors.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? Does all soy have the ability to disrupt endocrine process? I'm not a biologist,
Yes,
so I don't know.
it does, but not to the degree that your body wouldn't replenish itself. Like I said, just eating is bad for you. If you look at the biological processes, because you're throwing off those hydrogens, those oxidants, you know, oxidizing metabolites but your body has these systems to swoop them up, as I said, and turn them into other things that it can use. So if you eat constantly, even if you're exercising, maybe not you're constantly dealing with the metabolites. You know, digesting protein, you create ammonia. That's toxic to our bodies, but our liver, rub your liver, takes care of that and turns it into things that don't hurt our body. So yeah, it does have some disruptors, and of course they're going to delve into that and see how much is amplified by us messing with our crops.
Mm-hmm. Big field.
Yeah, it's huge. It's really kind of fun. It is fun.
Sounds like half the jobs in the world are going to be related to biology.
Well, we're going to be struggling for our survival.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know. But on a good note, there's some brilliant people out there, and our technology is amazing. We just have to stop vying for power and money. You know, it's unfortunately got to hit home. It's where all we care about is feeding each other and, you know, taking care. So that's the
Taking
deal.
care of the planet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. She'll shake us all off at some point, like, you know, a dog with fleas. Get them off and start over again, you know.
The earth will.
I really think so. Hopefully.
Did you get that analogy? The planet is going to shake us off, huh?
Uh-huh. She's going to.
Well, nature will.
Yeah, yeah.
And the balances that have to get corrected.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's your view of the future, since we're on this?
I think
Where are we going
it
from here?
lies in education. I really do, which is why I'm here. It lies in critical thinkers, education, people who want to get out of their comfort zone, because we're all comfortable. We like our lives. You know, there are people in my family that you know, buy water bottles and by the dozen, and it's like, you know, just that simple act. It's like have you, because I taught high school for a year, and I took them over to I was in Cambridge, took them to the Cambridge dump. It changed everybody's life. They had no clue, like, it's so easy to throw stuff away, right? It's easy for us, and I know it's nobody's fault. It's just the way what we've fallen into. So it's going to depend on people going like, I can't take the easy route anymore. I have to take the right route, and then you embrace it and you kind of celebrate it, and it becomes the easy route. So I think the future could be bright, but because we have the brains and the technology, but I worry about people's ability to give up what they like, you know, and I worry about ignorance. And I don't mean that I just mean people, not stupid people, but people who are ignorant or naive. I worry about that. So, and look around the world today. It's like, you know, people killing each other because it's just ignorance, I think. So, anyway.
So are we going to make it?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Okay, hope.
yeah. On the way in, I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about the New York's World's Fair in the 50s, and how they had all this cool stuff like a phone with the you could see who you're talking to, and it's like, well, here it is. They also envisioned, like stuff they envisioned for the future. They envisioned an underwater hotel or place to stay, and there actually is one in Key Largo. Does anybody know about that? I didn't know about that. There used to be like a research station, and they turned it into an underwater hotel. So you have to be a diver, and you go down there and you stay in this underwater hotel. So there are other areas that we could go as far as the Earth goes. But yeah, I think we just have to get a handle on it. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know.
So are we going to see a population crash
No.
coming up, or is it going to be a gradual correcting of the birth rate down to something sustainable?
I think it'll be a correction. I think there's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised, and this is kind of sad to think about, but we've kind of seen it already, where there's like environmental catastrophes that wipe out a bunch of people. Who knows what could happen to Ebola, right? That could wipe out a bunch of people. Of course, they have a medication for that they haven't approved, so that kind of stuff gets me angry too. But I think nature will constantly try and correct the human species, and I think we know enough now, and we're scared enough now, where we're going to try and get a handle on it. But really, it's up to like you guys, to just get out there and like with your kids and your kids' kids and calm everything down and really realize that everything's going to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to get sustainable.
Yep. Yeah.
So our last little piece, I know you've got to run fairly soon here, is we're working on developing some scientific literacies, as I showed you from the other subject areas. What would you add to that list with respect to biology and to, or just human life? What would things that would come to your mind that any scientifically literate student graduating from GCC should know about the field that you're in?
Well, I think the big thing is to start at square one, because what's so interesting is I'm finding, like, my students that come into anatomy and physiology really have no idea about a cell. Or if you have a basic understanding how energy is captured and released, you can apply that over and over and over again to everything you're doing. And I know that doesn't make sense now, but that's where you start. So just start at the beginning, because it makes sense. Biology builds on itself. Science builds on itself. The other thing is, to read lots of stuff that's out there. Read, Star Magazine. And then I have my students do this, and then read Scientific America, and then read, medical journals, and look at the range of opinion about one thing. And then get curious yourself, because there are answers out there, but I guess my point is, be a critical thinker. That's huge for literacy. Get the basic things that are established in science and are irrefutable, and then build on that and be a critical thinker. Who knows what idea you'll come up with that could change lives. I mean, it'd be incredible.
So develop curiosity, understand the basics, and the basics is what we're kind of working towards here.
Yeah, so ask why. Like if something I just told you about today, and some of you have done that, and you're like, well, why is that? Right? And of course I could give you an answer, and you could say, well, why is that? But that's good. Why? And sometimes I do this in my classes, and we get off track, but we're back down at the little part. And then it makes sense, because then you can connect the dots, and you can see where people have gone wrong, right? So it's just that kind of thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's the difference between memorizing and understanding.
Exactly. Although, I mean, there is memorizing in science, but students just spend way too much time trying to memorize this language without going why, because that's when you'll get it. So like I give essays on my tests, and if they get the word wrong, but they get the idea right, they pretty much get it right. Like you're there. Now you just get those words correct, because that helps you look like you know what you're talking about. But I know you know. So yeah, it's very important. It's much more important to get the concept and relate it to your life so that it sticks, right? That's how memory is formed. Repetition is long-term memory, and it sticks if it's relevant. You know, get embarrassed. Step outside of your comfort zone. That makes things stick. I love embarrassing my students. I'm like, I'm just being a good teacher. You know, it's good. It's all right.
So the way to connect biology, of course, is understanding themselves and their own body.
That's right.
And how it all works,
Yep.
and watching how things affect it.
Right, right. Because then you're not at the mercy of the pharmaceutical companies, or, you know, these bogus articles that you see in magazines. You'll know enough, or at least know enough to ask, I wonder if that's really true, and then you start researching. That's the great thing about the internet, is it's out there. Like, you have access to information that I didn't going through school. You know, we had to go to the library and open 500 books, and you're lucky if you got it within a few hours. Whereas you just Google. You know, if you get good at Googling, you can dig. You can find out. Just don't believe everything. But if you have a basic understanding of your body and the way things work, it's going to give you a critical thinking mind, which is really, really good.
One of our previous guests was very focused on non-processed foods, eating simple, direct
Yeah.
vegetables, fruits, that kind of thing. You buy
Oh yeah,
that?
for what we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
it's just, you're not going to cause this huge shift in your immune response, in your digestive response, because that's what we're meant to eat. So, you know, and cooking and processing and stripping things, you know, just not only changes our ability to digest that, but it triggers immune responses, and we don't get any nutrients. You know, if you take like white bread, for instance, they've, white bread, enriched, processed bread. What they've done is they've taken this healthy, beautiful wheat kernel, and they've stripped all the stuff that we kind of don't like the taste of, but where all the stuff is, and then they mash down the white, yummy part. They add some crap to that makes it taste even better, and then they add synthetic enrichment. So because they realize they've just stripped out all the, I mean, think about the time and the money, whereas if you were just to eat like a whole grain, you'd eat half the amount, if not less, and you get, 3 times. So nutrient dense is not empty calories, right? So if we're all supposed to consume, say, 1,800 calories a day, if you track, like do a little experiment, track, say, pick any vitamin you need, like vitamin B12 or vitamin A, or track how much you might get in a day. You'd be surprised how little you get if you ate a typical diet, right? Whereas if you eat unprocessed, raw food, you need so much less, and it's packed with stuff, and you don't overconsume, and you don't gain weight. So it all ties into human health as well.
Yeah. All right, any final questions? Yeah.
So this goes back to what you were talking about earlier with microbiomes, but I was thinking, me and my sister are like, do we have the same microbiome?
It's very closely related. Now, is she a twin? Because they're doing amazing studies on twins, yeah.
But like, I get sicker more often than she does.
Mm-hmm.
But she has all these sort of like intolerances, like she's lactose intolerant and gluten intolerant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that all shifts in our microbiome
Yes.
since birth?
Yeah,
If we like swapped microbiome, would we both be fine?
possibly. That would be an incredible area of research. And I can email you some of these articles that are out. This lady's at the head of National Institute of Health who's doing all this research, but they're studying twins. That's why I asked, because identical twins have basically identical microbiomes, whereas other twins don't, but they're slightly different and they shift differently. So if they were thinking they could blend them, so that's a great point. Yeah, so that might be the answer, right? It's like they're taking, the stem cells from your family members, fetal cord cells, and storing them, because those cells can be used later. So I took, like, my son's cord blood when he was born. They took those cells and they're frozen, right? If I got sick in a certain way, they could take those cells out, those fetal cells, and inject them in me somehow, and to help me recover. I mean, that's proven. So it's the same thing. But because we're so closely related, it'll work. We won't project it. So I doubt you would reject your sister's microbiome. Yeah, that's cool stuff.
Wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Anything else? Questions?
Huh?
Yeah.
One, I guess on healthcare, since you're in that field,
Mhm.
because of the microbiome, are they looking at less C-section deliveries out there based
Yeah.
on the same studies?
Yeah, they sure are. They are. Yeah, and nursing, right? You know, when I was a baby, my mother was taught that the bottle formula was so much healthier for your child. So we were all bottle fed. So, you know, things going back to kind of a more of a natural cycle, yeah, but they absolutely, for a lot of reasons actually, but this is yet another supportive reason to not do C-sections if you don't have to. Unfortunately, humans, it's not a perfect system, so humans have died, you know, without modern medicine in giving birth, but absolutely, they're realizing how important it is. So what they'll do is come up with some way to inoculate C-section babies. Kissing your baby, I just read this article, is so important if you don't have dental health problems. Because what happens is we have this microbiome in our mouth that basically keep us from getting cavities, but if we feed it too many, say, refined sugars, other bad bacteria take over, and that's how you get a cavity. So mothers that kiss their babies, you know, on the lips, on the cheeks, or whatever, and babies are putting their, you know, on their fingers, whatever, the babies can actually get inoculated not only with the good bacteria that keep your teeth clean and your gums healthy, but also the bad bacteria, and can really predispose them to dental disease before they even have teeth. So that's actually out in the pediatric journals now.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's funny, babies, if you notice babies, like great kids, right? They'll stick their hands in your mouth on purpose,
Yeah.
right? And then they'll put them in their own mouth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a built-in transfer mechanism of
Absolutely.
that biome.
Yeah.
Neat.
I just had a question about the dental thing. I have a cavity in almost every molar, but they're all filled. Would that still affect it because they are there? Or since they're sort of dealt with, is that?
Well, your tooth is fixed,
Yeah.
right?
But the bacteria isn't necessarily on.
Right, right. So, you know, it's hard because we have to, it's again, not anyone's fault. It's really society's fault, I think, where we've because, you know, there are undeveloped countries, right? You think that they might have horrible dental care, but there are countries like in Africa, there is no such thing as a cavity. But it's only because, and they're starving, they're malnourished, but they're eating raw, natural, unrefined sugars. So there's all good bacteria there. So that's one area that's okay. They might obviously have a lot of other issues. But yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Sue.